Imagine, imagine for a second that you are holding a ransom note in your hands. Pause. Twos.
Okay. Yeah.
It's written clearly, right? The terms are absolute, non-negotiable.
Right.
But, it doesn't ask for unmarked bills left in a briefcase under a park bench or anything like that. No, it asks for thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars every single month.
Yeah. A recurring ransom.
Exactly. And what do you actually get in return for paying this exorbitant fee? You get the privilege of simply speaking to your own customers. Pause twos. So ask yourself, what if the so-called industry standard for email marketing, the systems trusted by literally millions of businesses, is actually just a legalized trap?
It's a pretty staggering premise to start with, I'll admit. But when we actually dive into the mechanics of how this industry operates,
Mm,
you really do start to see the invisible wire.
you really do.
You start to realize just how much of digital business is, well, built on rented land.
Rented land. That is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We have a massive stack of source material in front of us today.
We really do.
Specifically, we're looking at an extensive, eye-opening series of comparative teardowns produced by the creators of a platform called No Limit Emails, or NLE for short.
Right. And we should be clear right off the bat. Our goal today isn't just to read a software review.
Oh, absolutely not.
We aren't here to just validate a sales pitch. We're using their teardowns as a lens to look at a much larger and frankly much darker narrative about digital liberation.
Yeah, it's basically a thriller. We're going to explore the hidden, escalating costs of scaling a business right now and look really closely at a radically different open source alternative that's trying to break these chains.
The central conflict in these sources is just wild.
Mhm.
On one side, you have the legacy email service providers,
The ESPs.
right? The ESPs everyone has heard of, companies that have dominated for over 2 decades. And on the other side, the sources advocate for a totally new model, an open source private infrastructure system.
So, our mission today is to unpack the exact math, the hidden fees, and the literal architecture of email to show you exactly who controls your digital voice.
Let's start right at the beginning, the
Yeah.
entry point.
Yes. Because when you look at legacy ESPs, the initial offer always looks incredibly inviting.
Oh, it looks safe. It looks free.
Right. But it's a facade, isn't it?
It is entirely by design. The facade of free or, incredibly low entry pricing is the hook.
The bait.
Exactly. The teardowns highlight platforms like Sender, which advertises a free forever tier for, I think, up to 15,000 emails a month.
Yeah, 15,000.
Or you look at Aweber, which is this massive 26-year-old
Yeah.
giant offering classic 14-day free trials or ultra cheap starter packages.
And I mean, you look at that and think, great, I'm a solo entrepreneur or I run a small bakery. This is perfect. It feels like a genuine helping hand.
It really does. But the sources argue these models exist for a very specific calculated reason. And, spoiler alert, it's not out of corporate generosity.
Ha.
Right. They want to lock you into their proprietary ecosystem while your list is small. The whole strategy relies on friction.
Friction. Okay, let's talk about that because to me, it feels like a digital roach motel.
That is the perfect analogy.
Right. Like it's incredibly easy to check into when you're small, but violently expensive and technically exhausting to leave once your business actually relies on it.
Absolutely. Because think about what it actually takes to move an established email list.
Yeah.
By the time you hit, say, 20,000 or 50,000 subscribers, you're entrenched.
You have automated welcome sequences built in their specific builder.
You have tags, segmentation rules, landing pages integrated into their API.
And to move, you have to export all these CSV files, pray you don't lose the metadata, rebuild every single visual automation from scratch somewhere else, and somehow reestablish your sender reputation.
And their last point is critical. Reestablishing your sender reputation. This brings us to the actual architectural reality beneath this cheap pricing.
Okay, let's get into the architecture. The sources mention platforms like Elastic Email, Drip, Constant Contact, MailerLite. What is the structural issue here?
Well, even when you upgrade out of the free tier, right, even when you're paying hundreds of dollars a month, you are almost universally placed on shared hosting and shared IP pools.
Let's slow down here because this is where it gets tense. Explain this to me like I'm a business owner, not a network engineer. What exactly is a shared pool and why is it so dangerous?
Sure. Let's use a real world analogy. Imagine a shared IP pool is like riding a public transit bus.
Okay, I'm on a bus.
An IP address is essentially the digital license plate of the server sending your emails. With a standard ESP, they group you together with hundreds, maybe thousands of other businesses on the exact same server.
Using the exact same digital license plate.
Exactly. Now, Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, they all use incredibly sophisticated AI filters to stop spam,
Mhm.
and they evaluate the reputation of that license plate.
So they're looking at the bus.
They were looking at the bus. If just one bad actor gets on that bus, say, someone who bought a scraped, illegal list of 100,000 emails and blasts out spam, the AI notices immediately.
It sees the high bounce rates.
It sees people hitting mark as spam. And it doesn't just punish that one spammer, it pulls over the entire bus.
Wait, so even if my business practices are totally pristine, even if my audience double opted in and I follow every single anti-spam law perfectly,
Yes.
my critical business emails might land in the spam folder just because someone I've never met on the same service decided to send garbage.
According to the mechanics of shared IP pools, yes.
Yes.
You are essentially paying for the sins of strangers. Your deliverability is at the mercy of the lowest common denominator.
That is infuriating. I'm paying a premium to share a reputation with potential bad actors.
You have zero control over who else is sharing your sending reputation. And the sources actually dive deep into how this affects efficiency, too.
Oh, right, the AI comparison. This
No.
was fascinating.
Yeah, so the teardowns included this specific diagnostic test. They fed the back-end data and routing info of Aweber, again, a 26-year-old Titan, and No Limit emails, which is roughly 6 years old, into an AI analyzer.
To evaluate system efficiency.
Right. The AI scored Aweber a 7.0 out of 10. No Limit email scored between 8.9 and 9.8.
A 26-year-old enterprise company getting beaten by a 6-year-old platform in a blind AI test. What does system efficiency actually mean in this context, though?
It basically comes down to technical debt.
Hmm.
A company that's been around for over 2 decades has layers upon layers of legacy code.
Like putting a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid.
Exactly. When they update, they're patching old architecture rather than building from the ground up. Newer platforms built on modern open source frameworks don't carry that bloat, so emails compile and route faster.
Okay, so the underlying architecture is shared, potentially bloated, and leaves you totally vulnerable. But here's something from the sources that honestly feels, well, insulting.
The powered by text.
The powered by tax, yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the branding watermarks.
This is such a staple of the industry standard.
It really is. The sources point out that with traditional ESPs like Sender or MailerLite, if you're on these standard tiers, every single email you send includes a mandatory watermark at the bottom.
Powered by sender.
Right. Powered by MailerLite with a little hyperlink.
Let's break down the logic of that.
Yeah.
You are paying these platforms a monthly fee to use their software, but simultaneously they're forcing you to function as an unpaid digital billboard.
I am advertising their company to my carefully cultivated, hard-earned list of prospects.
Exactly. You're paying them to market their service to your audience.
It's just a branding tax. Imagine if you bought a television and every time you turned it on, you had to watch a mandatory commercial for the company that made the TV.
It just demonstrates a fundamental imbalance of power, You're treating them as a utility, but they're treating your audience as a lead generation tool for their own growth.
Okay, so we've established the bait. The entry level is a trap. The architecture puts you on a vulnerable bus, and they use your emails as free advertising. But let's follow the progression here.
What happens when you succeed?
Yes. What happens when your business actually does what it's supposed to do?
This is where the narrative in the sources dramatically shifts. If the entry level is about architectural compromise, the scaling phase is about what the NLE founders describe as exponential financial punishment.
The penalty for success. Pause ones. If you thought the watermark was annoying, the numbers we're about to explore are going to induce some serious vertigo.
The math gets pretty dark here.
I'm going to walk through these slowly, pulling them directly from the comparative teardowns, just to give you a true sense of the overwhelming financial wall businesses hit when they grow.
Let's look at the data. Let's hear the numbers.
Okay, let's start with HubSpot. Massive name. According to the sources, it's not uncommon to pay $800 a month just to start on their professional tiers. But the kicker,
The onboarding fee.
a $7,000 onboarding fee before you even send a single email.
Wow.
ActiveCampaign. The teardown shows that for 50,000 contacts, you are looking at roughly $5,100 every single month.
Just for 50,000.
MailerLite. Around $1,900 a month if your list reaches 500,000 contacts.
And it just keeps escalating.
It does. Look at Keep. Nearly $1,997 a month for 75,000 contacts.
Hold on.
And that doesn't even include hidden fees.
Right. The sources note they can charge $1,000 to $2,000 just for data migration.
Or $150 an hour for technical support, and then Klaviyo.
Oh, the Klaviyo number is shocking.
The sources claim that if you ever reach the massive scale of 10 million contacts on Klaviyo, you'd be charged $32,000 per month.
$32,000 every 30 days. Over $380,000 a year simply to maintain communication with an audience you already acquired.
Wait. I have to play devil's advocate here. I look at those numbers, and part of me thinks, well, if you have 10 million contacts, you're probably making millions of dollars. You can afford it.
That's the common defense, sure.
But more importantly, don't these software companies need to charge this much? Maintaining massive server farms, bandwidth, zero downtime? Isn't enterprise infrastructure genuinely that expensive?
That's a very logical question.
Yeah.
And it's precisely the premise that the NLE founders, Evan and Doug, dissect in their analysis. The short answer is no. The infrastructure is not that expensive.
Really?
Really. To understand why, we have to cut through the industry norms and look at what they call the contact-based pricing fallacy.
The contact-based pricing fallacy. Okay, unpack that for me. How does it work?
Legacy ESPs base their entire revenue model on the size of your database. They charge you based on the number of contacts you hold in your account.
Right, the tiers.
But think about what a contact actually is from a computing perspective. It is essentially a single row in a database. It contains a first name, a last name, an email address, maybe some tags.
It's just text.
It's just a line of text. Storing a line of text in a modern cloud database costs fractions of a microscopic penny in actual server space. Data storage is incredibly cheap right now.
So the cost to the software company to store my 50,000 contacts is virtually identical to the cost of storing 5,000 contacts.
From a raw infrastructure standpoint, the difference is negligible. But they increase your monthly bill by thousands of dollars.
Because they aren't charging based on their costs.
Exactly. They are penalizing you for the size of your audience. They are taxing the perceived value of your success. Even if you have 50,000 contacts and you only email them once a quarter, you're still paying that massive premium every single month just to keep their data housed on the platform.
So, to use an analogy, it's like renting a self-storage unit. But instead of charging you a flat rate for a 10 by 10 room, the manager comes in, appraises your boxes, sees expensive electronics instead of old clothes, and suddenly triples your rent,
That illustrates it perfectly.
even though your boxes take up the exact same amount of physical space.
You are being charged for the value of your assets, not the cost of the service. But the sources reveal that the control goes even deeper than just exorbitant storage fees.
Oh, right, the upload restrictions. I saw this in the teardowns and it blew my mind.
It's a huge issue. Many top-tier platforms like ActiveCampaign or Keep have incredibly strict rules regarding bulk uploads.
Meaning I can't just import my own list.
Right. If you go to a trade show and collect 5,000 business cards or acquire a list of legally compliant targeted leads, you often cannot simply upload that CSV file into your account.
Why not? If I'm paying them $5,000 a month, shouldn't I be able to put whatever legal data I want into my database?
You would think so. But these platforms actively force you to build your lists, primarily through their own proprietary gated opt-in forms.
They say it's for compliance, right?
They argue it's to protect that shared IP pool we talked about earlier. But the practical result is an immense data moat. They control the flow of data into your business.
So let me get this straight. They control exactly how the leads get into the system. They charge you a massive inflated premium to hold those leads. And they charge an astronomical fee to actually send emails to them, all while keeping you on a shared bus with other people.
It is total, top-to-bottom control of your digital asset.
That is just...
Wow. Which leads us to a fascinating and, frankly, somewhat dark evolution in the digital marketing industry.
Because if you can't upload lists...
Exactly. Because legacy ESPs restrict bulk uploads and charge exponentially, businesses needed a way to bypass this lock-in. An entire sub-industry had to be born.
Right. If you're a B2B company and you need to reach out to 50,000 new prospects a month, you can't afford to pay Klaviyo 30 grand. You have to find another way.
And that brings us to the underground alternative, the dark side of scaling. We transition from the locked garden of standard ESPs into the incredibly complex world of cold email outreach infrastructure.
The sources refer to this as the cold email matrix. And looking at the numbers, this is where the story turns into a $2 million nightmare.
Because you cannot use MailChimp or ActiveCampaign to send bulk cold emails. They would ban you instantly. So businesses are forced to build their own independent sending systems.
But as Evan and Doug meticulously point out in the documents, this alternative has mutated into a financial and technical beast. It's almost beyond comprehension.
It really is.
When I was reading this section of the source material, the math actually gave me anxiety. It induces this feeling of being totally overwhelmed. Let's walk the listener through the exact mathematical breakdown presented by the NLE founders.
The goal here is sending 1 million cold emails a day.
Right. 1 million a day. How do people currently attempt to do this using the standard inbox rotation method? Let's build the matrix.
Okay, let's lay out the infrastructure costs methodically. The core problem of cold email is that you cannot just log into a single Gmail account and send a million emails. Google will permanently ban your account after a few hundred sends.
Obviously.
So to bypass these hard limits, the industry standard is to spread the volume out over thousands of different accounts. This is called inbox rotation.
Okay, so step one of this matrix, domains. You can't use your main company domain right, because if it gets flagged as spam, your actual business emails to your staff or clients will stop working.
Correct. You must protect your root domain at all costs. So to send a million emails a day, the sources calculate you need roughly 10,000 separate burner domains.
10,000 domains.
Registration for a standard .com or .co domain is about $10 a year. That is $100,000 annually right out of the gate just to register the digital real estate.
$100,000 just for the names. But domains don't send emails. Inboxes do.
Which brings us to step 2, the inbox costs. To safely fly under the radar of Google and Microsoft sending limits, you need to attach multiple premium inboxes to those 10,000 domains.
Okay, what's the mathematically safe setup for that volume?
The setup requires roughly 50,000 individual Google Workspace or Microsoft Outlook inboxes.
Hold on. 50,000 separate email accounts, like user1 at domain.com, user2 at domain.com, all the way to 50,000?
Yes, and these cannot be free consumer accounts. They must be paid business accounts to have the necessary routing capabilities.
Oh my God.
At roughly $7 per month per inbox, the cost to Google or Microsoft equates to $350,000 per month.
Pause twos. $350,000 a month just to rent the inboxes. The scale of that is absurd. But the breakdown doesn't stop there, does it? Because once you have the domains in the inboxes, you can't just hit send.
No. That leads to step 3, the verification extortion. This is perhaps the most insidious hidden cost in the whole matrix.
Because of bounce rates.
Exactly. In cold email, if you send messages to addresses that no longer exist, the email bounces back. If your bounce rate goes above a tiny threshold, usually 2 or 3%, Google's AI will instantly flag all your domains as spam and burn your entire infrastructure to the ground.
So to protect your $350,000 investment, you have to be absolutely certain every single email on your list is valid before you press send.
You must use third-party email verification services. These services ping the receiving server to check if the inbox exists before you send your campaign.
But they charge per verification.
Verifying 1 million emails daily at roughly half a cent per email equates to $50,000 a day in verification fees.
$50,000 a day, which means $1.5 million per month, just to check if the email addresses are real.
And we are still not done. Step 4, the infrastructure extras. You need an SMTP relayer to actually handle the massive data transfer.
What exactly is an SMTP relayer for people who aren't technical?
SMTP stands for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. If your inbox is the post office box, the SMTP relayer is the fleet of semi-trucks that actually drives the letters across the country.
Got it.
Services like Amazon SES provide this massive transit infrastructure. At this volume, Amazon SES fees add roughly another $30,000 a month.
Okay, 30 grand for the trucks. What else?
Then you need IP addresses. Remember the shared bus analogy. For this scale, you cannot ride the bus. You need true, bare metal dedicated IPs.
Meaning physical, unshared hardware dedicated solely to your traffic.
Exactly. Let's estimate 5 of these premium dedicated IPs, which comes to around $3,750 a month.
And who is running all of this? I certainly don't know how to wire 10,000 domains to 50,000 inboxes through an Amazon SMTP.
That is the final piece. Because this setup is staggeringly complex, you cannot run it yourself. You require a full-time, highly specialized network engineering and maintenance team.
What does that cost?
The sources estimate a minimum cost of $20,000 a month just in salaries to keep this fragile system operational.
So let me add this all up. Pause twos. You have the domains, 350,000 for the inboxes, 1.5 million for the verifier, 30,000 for Amazon, 4,000 for the IPs, 20,000 for the team.
Yep.
We are looking at over $2 million a month. $2 million just to send email.
What is truly fascinating and honestly terrifying about this breakdown is not merely the sheer scale of the cost, it's the profound fragility of the architecture.
Fragility.
The sources argue forcefully that this $2 million setup is not a robust enterprise-grade solution. It is a fragile house of cards.
How so? If I'm paying $2 million a month, shouldn't it be bulletproof?
Think about the dependencies involved.
Okay.
Look at how many third parties hold your fate in their hands. You are entirely reliant on Google or Microsoft maintaining their current algorithm regarding inbox sending limits.
Which they change all the time.
You're reliant on a third-party verification service staying online and accurate. You are reliant on Amazon SES not suddenly deciding your traffic violates a new internal policy.
So if just one link in that massive chain breaks,
The whole thing shatters. If the verifier goes offline for 6 hours and you send a batch of untested emails causing a massive bounce rate, Google's AI instantly flags all 50,000 of your
the
inbox.
domains are burned.
Your center reputation is destroyed. The entire $2 million operation collapses in a single afternoon. You are paying a ransom for infrastructure where you possess zero true control.
It's like building a solid gold mansion on top of an active fault line and paying $2 million a month for the privilege of living there.
Pause twos, which transitions us perfectly to the core of this entire analysis.
Alternative is.
The crushing weight of that $2 million matrix and the extortionate value tax fees of the legacy ESPs. This is exactly why the founders of No Limit Emails state they built their own system. They looked at this landscape and realized they needed a way out. They needed digital sovereignty. They realized that tweaking the existing systems wasn't enough. They had to build an entirely different paradigm.
Let's take a deep breath of fresh air here. We've been deep in the matrix. How does a radically different architecture actually work? What is the alternative to the shared bus and the $2 million house of cards?
The model proposed by NLE fundamentally rewrites the rules of engagement by shifting the location of the infrastructure. Instead of placing you on a shared hosting server in their facility or forcing you to daisy chain 50,000 Google inboxes together, NLE installs a private email server directly onto the user's own domain.
Let's make sure we understand the mechanism here. How does that work technically?
They utilize a service called Cloudflare to route and secure this private installation.
Cloudflare.
Right. Cloudflare acts as a massive global security shield and traffic director for the internet. By installing the sending server behind your domain's Cloudflare account, the traffic is isolated.
So you're no longer on the public bus.
Exactly. You are driving your own private vehicle on a secure private highway.
So to go back to our earlier metaphors, it's the difference between renting a highly monitored hotel room where the management limits your guests, controls the locks, and charges you $50 every time you open the minibar.
Yep.
Versus building an independent fortress on your own land where you hold the only key and you control the plumbing.
Exactly. The isolation provides the security. But the technology powering the interior of that fortress is equally vital to their argument. NLE doesn't use a closed proprietary source code that limits your flexibility.
Because SaaS, software as a service, is usually a black box.
Right. The sources reveal they use a heavily modified version of an open source marketing automation tool called Modic.
Open source. I saw Modic mentioned heavily in the documents. Explain why open source matters here. Why is that better than proprietary code?
Well, proprietary sauce is a closed box. The company that owns it decides what features you get, and more importantly, what features they put behind a paywall.
If you want advanced reporting, you upgrade.
If you want custom API integrations, you upgrade. Open source software, by definition, has its source code freely available to be modified. Because NLE is built on an open source framework, it allows for infinite flexibility without the artificial limitations of a corporate paywall.
So users can build exactly what they need.
Yes. According to the teardowns, users can create unlimited landing pages, build massively complex behavioral automation flows, and integrate with almost any other software via webhooks, all without hitting a rigid, artificial barrier that demands a credit card upgrade. You aren't boxed into rigid corporate templates.
Okay, so the architecture is private, routed through Cloudflare, and the software is open source.
Let's talk about the shattered price ceiling, because we just spent the last 20 minutes talking about $32,000 a month for Klaviyo and a literal $2 million a month for a cold email matrix.
The contrast is pretty mind-blowing.
What does this private fortress claim to cost? The contrast presented in the sources is genuinely stark. Because they aren't charging for the size of your database, they reject the contact-based pricing fallacy entirely. NLE offers flat rates based purely on sending volume.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, their bronze tier allows you to send 100,000 emails a month. The cost, $67 a month.
$67 compared to HubSpot's $800 plus a $7,000 onboarding fee.
Yes, and the pricing scales linearly, not exponentially. Their highest tier is what they call the unlimited tier.
What does that include?
For $397 a month, the sources claim users receive absolute unlimited email sends. They receive unlimited contact database storage. They receive 5 dedicated IPs right out of the gate, so you aren't sharing a reputation with anyone. And crucially, it includes built-in email verification.
Wait. Built-in verification. That's the part that costs $1.5 million a month in the cold email matrix setup. How can they include that for under $400?
By changing the architecture. In the matrix setup, you pay a third-party API every time you check an email.
Right.
By building the verification protocol directly into the private server's architecture, the system pings the receiving servers internally before sending. That massive third-party extortion fee is entirely eliminated because the capability is baked into the engine itself.
Sounds incredible. $397 a month for unlimited everything plus built-in verification. But I have to push back here.
Sure.
As a consumer, unlimited is the most dangerous word in tech. Every cell phone provider says unlimited data until you actually try to use it, and then they throttle you to dial up speeds. Does this NLE system actually work at massive enterprise scale, or is unlimited just clever marketing copy?
It is the right question to ask, and the sources provide verifiable, real-world evidence to counter that skepticism.
They do.
Yeah. In one of the in-depth teardown videos, the founder, Evan, actually logs into his own live personal NLE account on screen. He navigates to his dashboard to demonstrate that he is actively hosting over 10.4 million contacts in his database.
10.4 million, the number that would cost 32 grand on Klaviyo.
Correct. And then he opens the system logs to prove performance. He demonstrates that he is actively sending campaigns of 1 million emails in a single go. And the entire infrastructure, hosting 10 million leads and sending 1 million emails at once, is running smoothly on a system that costs him $397 a month.
Pause twos. 10.4 million contacts, sending 1 million at a time for less than $400. If those numbers are accurate and the video evidence suggests they are, that completely rewrites the mathematical reality of the entire internet marketing industry.
It shatters the illusion that enterprise-level communication inherently requires enterprise-level pricing.
But it brings up a huge operational question for me. Having a powerful, cheap tool is amazing, but a Formula One car is useless if you don't know how to drive it, and it's worse if you crash it.
Very true.
We saw earlier that legacy companies like Keep charge $150 an hour just for technical support. How does a radically cheaper platform handle support? If I break my private server, do I just submit a ticket and pray someone answers next week?
This brings us to a fascinating secondary disruption highlighted in the sources. When you disrupt the pricing model of an industry, you also have to fundamentally disrupt the support model. You cannot rely on slow, expensive corporate ticketing systems.
And NLE handles this with what they call the public square model.
Yes, instead of a faceless corporate interface where you wait 48 hours for an automated, unhelpful email response from an outsourced tech desk.
Which we all hate.
Right. The sources detail that NLE offers a 247, 365-day live video room. It is a persistent online meeting space accessible via meet.nolimitmails.com.
A live video room? That is such a different approach. It's conversational. It sounds incredibly human.
It reflects a radically different ethos. According to the documents, Evan, Doug, and their core technical team are constantly live in this room.
Like all the time.
They operate on the principle of complete transparency. They're willing to share screens with users. They actively troubleshoot complex DNS and routing issues live on the fly.
The sources even mentioned they do list hygiene live. Like someone comes in with a dead or unresponsive email list that isn't getting any opens, and the founders will literally run it through their internal hygiene and verification tools right in front of them to revive it.
They do. And if we connect this to the broader theme of our deep dive, this public square represents a massive shift from corporate opacity to peer-to-peer human accountability.
Democratizing access.
Exactly. They are essentially democratizing access to enterprise-level network engineers. When the actual creator of the software is sitting in a live video room, answering your questions face-to-face, and fixing your server configuration on screen, it builds a level of trust that a submit a ticket button simply cannot achieve.
It is the ultimate accountability. You can't hide behind corporate jargon if you are looking your customer in the eye on a video call. But I have to ask the ultimate skeptical question.
Let's hear it.
Because the math has to make sense somewhere. The sources mention that NLE hasn't raised their prices in 6 years. How is it economically sustainable?
Ah.
How can a company afford to offer unlimited sending, build private Cloudflare servers, host millions of contacts, and provide 24-hour live video engineering support for under $400 a month and never raise the price?
Yeah.
Are they just burning venture capital?
The answer lies in the architecture we discussed earlier. The math works because they aggressively eliminated the middleman.
Okay, break that down.
Think back to the $2 million cold email matrix. The vast majority of that cost wasn't raw computing power. It was markup. It was Amazon's AWS markup. It was Google Workspace's per inbox markup. It was the third-party verification company's massive margin.
Right. Everyone in that chain is taking a massive slice of the pie.
Exactly. By relying on an open source foundation like Mautic, NLE isn't paying massive licensing fees to conglomerates. By building the infrastructure directly on the user's Cloudflare setup and handling routing natively, they bypass the exorbitant fees of commercial SMTP relayers.
So their own costs are low.
Their internal overhead is shockingly low because they aren't renting infrastructure from the giants. They are leveraging the foundational protocols of the internet itself. Therefore, they are able to pass the true cost of internet infrastructure, which it turns out is actually very, very low, directly onto the user.
They cut out the rent seekers, they looked at an industry that functions like an overpriced luxury rental market, and they figured out how to let people build their own private wells.
That is a very apt way to summarize their mission.
Wow. Let's start bringing this entire journey full circle. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, pulling apart these teardowns.
To synthesize the overarching narrative presented in these sources, businesses today face a very distinct fork in the road when it comes to their digital infrastructure.
A clear choice.
On one path, you can remain a tenant on a shared digital property. You can use legacy ESPs where you ride the public bus, where you pay a branding tax, and where your rent increases exponentially every time your contact list succeeds and grows.
Ugh.
Or, if you need scale, you can navigate the fragile $2 million minefield of inbox rotation, praying Google doesn't change its algorithm.
Which is terrifying. Or you can choose the path of digital sovereignty. You can utilize open source technology to build your own private, isolated infrastructure on your own domain, controlling your own data.
Precisely.
And why should you, the listener, care about any of this? Because whether you are a massive agency handling millions of global leads or a solo entrepreneur just starting to build your very first audience, control over your customer data and the actual pipeline required to reach them is the only true asset your business possesses.
If you don't own the pipeline, you don't actually own the audience.
And that leads to a rather profound realization about the nature of modern digital business.
It really does.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Pause twos. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about the cost of sending emails. We've talked about the dollars, the cents, the servers, and the margins. But think about the data itself.
The lifeblood.
The actual lifeblood of your company. If you are using a platform that demands $1.5 million to verify a list, or if you're using a legacy ESP that actively forces you to keep your millions of hard-earned leads locked strictly on their servers, tracked behind their paywalls, and subject entirely to their arbitrary terms of service, who really owns your business?
If a single policy change or a silent algorithm update at a tech giant in Silicon Valley can sever your connection to your own customers overnight.
Are you an independent entrepreneur? Or are you just an unpaid employee working for your server host? Pause twos. Think about that ransom note we talked about at the beginning. Are you going to keep paying it? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions. We'll see you next time.